So for today's class, I thought we should look at a different pattern of like working with ECS. If you remember, most of the things we've been working on, we've done a lot of things on ECS in terms of like service to service communication. We've done that, right? We've talked about how to expose the service using a load balancer, how to put CloudFront at the edge. That was exactly what the last video was doing, right? Where we connected it to a hosted zone, like to a domain that we did have in the account, and we saw how we could just go to like lab.brainy.cloud and we could pretty much get to our application. So today we're going to be approaching it in a different form. So here, I'm not using a database. So I'll zoom in a bit. I'm not basically using a database here. And there are times also like where a pattern like this is used. You'll see patterns like this. Sometimes in some organizations, people will be like, okay, in our very critical environment like prod, staging, maybe we'll use AWS managed services. But maybe in our sandboxes, in our dev, we want to use more or less like our own managed services because those environments are not critical. They're just ways for us to integrate in AWS, but not basically, maybe we don't want to pay for a full RDS instance or we don't want to pay for Aurora, okay? So there are cases like this. So what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be doing a 3-tier application, right? But we're not just going to be stopping at 3-tier. And the 3-tier in this case is going to be allowing us to bring everything we've learned together, right? So in the sense like, it's like we'll be using, Service Connect. We'll be using more or less like to have the two services themselves talk to themselves. Remember, in ECS, one thing you need to understand is that every ECS service that you see, front-end, back-end, MySQL, they are obviously backed by a set of tasks, right? And those tasks are basically what we call containers, right? And those containers will be pulled from ECR at some point. And those tasks are actually gotten from like, basically if a task is coming up, there's a concept of a task definition. And it just tells you, how should I come up? Like, which image am I going to be using? Which secret am I going to be mounting? But if all that is new to you, check some of the videos that I've done in the past where I actually introduced ECS from the scratch. But something else I want to introduce here is also more or less like everything we've been talking about in before now has been more or less like on the infra side, right? We've talked so much about setting up the infra, but that's not all. Sometimes you're setting up the infra, but developers also want to be able to push their change, right? They want to work alongside with you. But sometimes the developers don't care about the private. They are not really very in tune with more or less like the private public subnet. Maybe that's an infra thing. Most times what developers really want is that they want to have developer experience, number one. More or less like, is there a way I can, test my changes locally without first pushing it to AWS? So sometimes the infra team more or less like take that as part of their responsibility also to create like a good developer experience for the developers. And I'm going to show you a very simple example of what that would look like. So once a developer is done with like working on his change locally, the next thing is I want to integrate back to the AWS cloud, right? So in this case, let's picture that this maybe is like a sandbox account where you need to first push your change to and test, right? And so there we'll be setting up this account for them. So on the infra side, we've done our job. We've done setting up the infra. And now all the developers want to do is maybe push their change to a branch. And once they push their change to a branch, all that branch is going to do is basically maybe push like changes to ECR, and that change is actually going to build a container from that pipeline, and that pipeline is pushed to ECR. Maybe that's one stage of the build, right? And I mean, everything can be automated, but here we're pretty much approaching it in more or less like two manual stages. So one is automated in the sense that when you push your change to GitHub, it's going to build and publish the image to ECR. That's step one. And then step two, we're also giving them a workflow for them to deploy their changes to AWS. So, and that's where AppConfig comes in. And I'm going to be sharing small about AppConfig. The whole idea is that in this case, AppConfig can do many things, but in this case, we are using it as a configuration management tool for ourselves in the sense that we're keeping, so we're breaking the infra into two parts, more or less like we have a part where we will control, and then we're giving a part to the developers to control. Because developers, we believe you should be able to increase the RAM and the CPU requests from that you want. So you like, oh, your service needs one CPU or it needs 2 CPU. You should be able to increase that without me, right? Maybe you want to add environment variables. You should be able to do all that without me in the picture, right? So without the infra team in the picture. So we're giving them that capability. And how we're doing that is we're using AppConfig. So more or less like we put a set of configurations in AppConfig and we let the developers themselves to go in there and tweak those changes to influence the application that they own, right? So just to break that separation of concern, we maintain the infra, but we give the developers the flexibility to author or manage the application that they host, okay? So that's it in a nutshell. I think the only thing that is a bit new here is AppConfig. we're using AppConfig. Today, we're also going to work with 2 GitHub Actions pipeline. So those are a bit new. I mean, we've done some little GitHub Actions, but this is where we're also bringing it. We're expanding it. Okay. So let's start with developer experience. So let's go into the code. So what I'm going to be showing you here, I think I can close this. We're going to be moving this a bit down. This is telling me my credits, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to zoom this in a bit just to give my ID some real estate, okay? So the first thing is we want to think about what, and again, if you're following this call, I'm going to push this change to GitHub. It's going to be on this repo. So if you ever have a copy of this repo, just know that you can always follow along. You can always see the changes that I upload at the end of the day, okay? So the first thing is that, first of all, let's think about this full stack app as something the developers manage. So it's not our own business, like that's application side of things, right? So there's like a backend, very simple, right? Just a, and I think if you've seen me, you know that we've done this so many times, right? So we start with Python 3.11, and then we expose the Python app on 8,000. That's really what the backend does. So there's an health check, blah, blah, blah. There is like the main itself, but our app actually does some things. But this is, honestly, this is not, just believe that the backend people, they have like an application they want to host. So we're not really going into details about it, right? Front end also, think about it, there's the front end team that does their thing. They have like a front end application. It has an HTML page. In this case, it's using Vue.js. But the thing that ties everything together is really there's like a Docker file for bringing up the backend. There is a Docker file for bringing up the front end. So this is what we use for dev. This is going to be something we use for prod, right? Because we're going to be fronting with Nginx, right? We have that. And again, like I said, this is one example where we are using MySQL, right? We're using our own Docker hosted MySQL. But you know that in a production environment, you should use RDS or you should use a managed database service just to reduce the burden to you. But sometimes I've seen cases like this where people want to use more or less like something in lower environments. You want to pretty much use something that is cheap, maybe something that is self-hosted, because that's not a critical environment, right? So we have this. But these are all 3 Docker files, right? So there's like the Docker file to bring MySQL 8.0. There is the front end to set up a front-end application. There is the back-end. But the thing is that if you have to think about this, having to work with these Docker files individually is a lot, right? And that is what I've done in a Docker Compose file. And if you don't know what a Docker Compose file is, it's just basically a way to compose. Like that's just what it does. It basically takes containers, right? So services that are hosted in containers, it composes them together such that you can see them as one whole self, right? So the point is that there's a MySQL service. It is built from the MySQL directory. This is going to be the container name. It has a number of environment variables. Yes, every container will always have things like that. Health check is there, basically doing a ping. On the backend side, we're also doing something similar. And here we're basically giving it the URL to connect to the database, right? And then we say it depends on, these are all things that if you look at Docker Compose documentation, it should be easy to follow, right? It's just saying depends on MySQL means this should be brought up when the, MySQL is held, right? So, and then it has a set of volumes. In the front end is also very simple in the sense that it has a container name, it has a set of environments, allow delete is true. These are just environment variables you can pass, but you can pass more environment. But remember, this is not really, this is not our own domain, right? I think sometimes also we can help them. We can help them enhance their developer experience. Sometimes developers can actually handle this. They can tell you, I have like a setup that I use for my local setup that brings up the application for me and helps me to test everything as a whole, right? So when we go into this full stack app and we check Docker Compose, right? If you do Docker Compose help, right, you will see that it's not magic. There's a number of compose command that you can run. So for example, you can run things like logs. You can build. You can up more or less like bring up the services. You can bring them down. There's a number of things you can do. And just so you know, Docker Compose it's one tool that is very good with developer experience in the sense that, remember, if you go back to our diagram, we're still thinking about like how will the user test the application locally, right? So like what's the user's flow going to look like, right? So with Docker Compose, you can basically do that too. So we've composed everything, and then we can do Docker Compose. Let's start with a build, right? So we'll just do build. So it's going to build. The whole concept of build is going to build all the containers. So the individual containers we built, and when it builds them, and then we can actually do Docker Compose. And I'm going to show you something about Docker Compose. So if you do Docker Compose up, what it's going to do is it's going to try to bring up all the services together, right? That's the whole idea of compose. It just composes all the services and it brings them up, right? So it's going to take some time because MySQL needs to be ready. And then after that, it tells us the URL is up, right? So very simple to do, right? Remember, we're not application developers. Maybe this is like an application you are supporting as somebody who is in the infra team or DevOps team or cloud team, right? So, but this is how they work with the application locally. They basically have this test, you can see, we can see second item. We can see, I don't know, new item. We can add item. That's the point. We can also delete item, and all that. But the thing is, one thing you should make mention, notice is that there's a place where we can set allow delete is true or false, right? So what it means is that if I do Control C, it's going to bring you out the application, right? Because I'm doing Docker Compose up. There's a way you can actually do -D to say run this as a daemon, right? In this case, I'm actually doing that. But if I also do things like false here, and I do Docker Compose up again, what I will do for you is that if I wait for the application to come up, let's see if this allow delete is going to kick in. The point is that sometimes you can actually influence applications with environment variables, right? So if this environment variable is set, it will behave in a certain way. If it's not set, you also behave. So if you refresh, for example, you can notice we now don't have the delete option again, right? So now you can't delete. So that's a feature we have. So locally, there are some things people do. So if I copy this part and I copy and I seed into that part, and something you can do, you can also do Docker Compose, logs. You can actually use Docker Compose, for example, to see logs of the services. You can basically see logs of the services running. You can use it to troubleshoot, but all this is local environment, right? So this is all you just working with it locally and making sure your services is running. But now the services is running. So what next? So if you go back to our diagram, we've been able to solve the issue of like developer experience. So it's more or less like we give them a Docker Compose file. We're helping them simplify how you can test locally. The good thing is that this same Docker Compose file is really what we're going to deploy to AWS, right? To bring everything together. Because now in their local machine, there's no concept of private, public, subnet. It's just basically something they're testing with, right? So once that is done, what next? And that's what we're now going to be building, because now we want to set up. So think about it. The developer is already fine. They're enjoying the applications. They're testing it locally. But we want to take that forward. We want to say, you're working with your application locally, but the ultimate destination is the cloud. So how do we take it further such that it can, see the same application hosted in the cloud from the example that I just showed you, right? So what's the next thing we're going to do? We're going to go here and we say, okay, the first thing we want to do, I have a bootstrap folder here. And it's a very simple folder. I have a bootstrap folder here. It's a very simple folder. And this folder is basically because I know that the developers, they have images that they work with locally. At some point, they need to push those images to AWS, right? So the first thing I'm doing here is, first of all, giving them a bootstrap. So I'll create a bootstrap. And all that bootstrap does is, it depends on how you manage it, depending on your environment. But what this bootstrap really does here is that it creates the repos that we need, number one. So it creates basically a set of repos, right? So it has like a number of TF-vars that you can pass in. So you can see the repos it's going to create. So it's going to create MySQL repo for you to push your MySQL image, backend, repo, and frontend, right? And it also creates some things like, so it creates the secret that's going to be used for the database. Just something we bootstrap at once. But there's also something I want to add, because if you see the diagram, this is the one we're using the Terraform module, a module that is out there for us to create ECR repository. You can use lifecycle. You can use things like lifecycle policies to say how long do you want the images to stay. Because images, imagine people are pushing images consistently. Sometimes you want to clean those images if you want, right? But you can tune the rule however you want it. But the one that appeals to me is really AppConfig, because that's really what I want to add to this class. The fact that we're also going to be setting up AppConfig for them to use, right? The point is that the app configuration is really how they configure their services once it's deployed, okay? So how they can influence the configuration. And what we're doing here is basically we actually bootstrapping it. So we are creating more or less like the initial configuration. The whole idea is that we're saying for MySQL, this is really the configuration you should use. So you should use the CPU, you should use this memory. For the backend, you should use the CPU, you should use this memory. But the whole idea is that we're opening this app config for them to be able to influence it, right? Change it. Because you don't want somebody to be pinging you because they want to increase the memory of their service. If they feel the service is bottleneck, they can actually go to app config and change the requirement if they want, right? So we'll create that first version. So what we're going to be doing, I'm going to be opening a new tab, and then I'm going to be going to that bootstrap path. So I'm going to go here, copy path, and then I'll go there and do this. And then I'll do, I think I need to do it. I need to export the AWS account I'll be using. So AWS underscore profile is equal to lab. Like I said, the source code of this is going to be available on my lab. That's number one. And then number two, the videos, obviously you can find it on my link. You can always watch it in full, see the source code, and you can always build from there, okay? So I've exported, I already know I'm in the right place. I'm going to do Terraform in it, just remember this is just a very simple file, right? So I'm just going to do Terraform apply, Terraform apply. So from this change, two things. It's going to create the repos that the services themselves need to push their images to, right? So the Docker containers we built locally. It's not long. We've left local change. Now you need to push it to somewhere in AWS that we can use. In this case, we've chosen ECR to do that. So we're going to be doing yes. So this is going to create the repos, create the app config, all that is done, right? So what we can actually scroll up again to see is the output because we will need them, right? So you can see there's an application ID, there's an environment ID, there's a profile ID, right? These are the two most important things that we need, okay? If I go back to my account and I go to ECR, what you notice is that we now have three repos, right, from that change. So there's now the backend, but you won't see any images for now. There's all the other repos, right? And then we go to app config. So we do app config. We go here, we find app config. You see that from that first push that we did, we've created a kind of more or less like simple app deployment. We've created our first application, right? In there is there's like an environment, in this case dev, and then we have like a profile, right? And in that profile, we've actually bootstrapped our initial configuration. So first of all, you can see here, when we create the first version, we say use latest, right? Because we don't really know the image versions that are ready just yet. So we say use latest, this is the configuration for the service, frontend, this is your configuration, and then MySQL, this is your configuration, okay? App config, there's a lot app config can do. If you want to read more about it, you can, right? There's a lot it can do. It can basically, here I'm using app config for infrastructure, but you can also use app config for even managing configurations for your application, right? And I think it has native integration with ECS where you can have like a sidecar that can actually help you reload your configurations from app config, right? So this is something if you're interested, you can go further and you can learn further, take it further upon yourself to learn more about it. So now that this is ready, what do you think is left? One thing you should also know is that I've actually pushed this full stack app to the repo. So it's there already. I don't need to repush it, right? It's there. So if I go back to the repo, I go back to this one, right? I need to show you one of the workflows, at least the first workflow we should work with. So if I go to GitHub, I'll show you the first workflow. The first workflow is simple. The whole idea is that, okay, you're done with your changes. When you push it to a branch in AWS, on GitHub, which mirrors our diagram, right? So we've shown, the first thing we showed in our diagram is developer experience. We showed how you can have that done with Docker Compose. We showed how it's now testing exchange. We've created the app config for their configuration to live. The next thing we want to do is that they should be able to push changes to GitHub, and that change should be able to more or less like build and push their images to ECR, right? So that's the next one we need to figure out, okay? So what I'm just going to be doing is I already have that workflow, right? So I already have that workflow. And how I can trigger, I already have the workflow and it's actually here. So demo, more or less like build and push is there. Ideally, if I push to develop or main, it's going to trigger, right? But since we're already on this call, it probably is not going to, because it looks out for if anything has changed in the backend, it will rebuild the backend. If anything has changed in the front end, it's going to rebuild, or MySQL is going to rebuild. But since we're already on this call and nothing of that has changed, I'm just going to trigger it manually. So what we're going to do, again, please, if you've not been watching my videos, have taught in the past about things like how you set up GitHub connection to your AWS, right? Using OIDC. If you've not seen that, watch my previous videos. The whole idea is that you don't need to create access secrets. You just need to give it a role that it will assume. So if I go to settings in this repo, let me see where I can find that. Yes, it's probably because I'm not logged in here, because I'm not the one controlling the repo from this side. I'm basically not logged in. But if I go to where I'm logged in, one thing you need to know is that if I go to settings, one thing you notice is that under secrets and variables, there's an action. So first of all, account ID, I tell it which account this CI/CD is for. The role to assume, I've given it to it. And if you remember, there was a time we actually set up that full integration. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is giving it an application ID because we'll need it, and then a profile ID. And we already have that from Terraform, right? So first of all, we'll go the app config, the application ID. We're just going to copy this. So I'm just going to do application ID. See, I think I need to do, okay, so just give me a second. So I'm just going to paste the app ID here. That's number one. It's going to ask me for maybe use authenticator app instead. Let me look for my authenticator. So let me see authenticator. This one. Which account is this now? Let me see. I'm just trying to authenticate. GitHub. Two-factor authentication is always good, so that this is it. So I'm going to verify. Hopefully it gets me in. So it updated, right? So app config is updated. That's number one. The second thing I want to update is the app config profile ID, right? We also got it from Terraform, right? So this is the profile. This is the environment ID. We actually need the profile ID. So I'm going to copy this one, and then I'm going to paste it here, right? So do Ctrl V, and then I'll go update secret. Again, you don't need to. They're all here, right? So what I pasted just now, this is the profile ID, right? And then if you also go back, this is the application. If you see, this is the app ID that I also pasted, right? So even if you didn't do it from Terraform, the Terraform output, you can actually just copy it and paste it in GitHub, okay? So, and I just did that. So let me just be sure that I'm actually in the right. So I'm going to open back that. I think we're here. So I've pasted that now, right? Okay. So the next thing we want to do, okay, I don't think I'll be able to do all that here. So basically what I'm going to just do is use the same place. So what I'm going to do is go to actions, right? You know, if you write GitHub action, there's usually like a place where you can test them. So the first one is really, one is deploy services. But this first one we want to do is we need our images first of all to make it to ECR, right? Before anything can happen. So what we can do is that there is also, so if you check the GitHub, this thing, the CI here, one thing you notice is that there's something in GitHub action called workflow dispatch, meaning aside your workflow being automated, you can also have it being, you can manually dispatch it. And here, what I'm just trying to say is that, okay, I'm giving them an option to say, sometimes you can force build, right? You can say, I want to build all the images. Because right now, the way the workflow is working is that if you change front end, that's when something is going to happen. But here I'm saying, I'm also giving them an option. What if you want to just build everything once and push? Okay, that's the option I'm giving them here. So what I'm going to be doing is go there and say, run this workflow, build all, and then I'm going to run the workflow, right? So we're going to run the workflow. There's also a concept of matrix in GitHub Action. The whole idea is that instead of you building one service after the other, you can basically build one service. You can actually have a matrix. So now we move from detecting the service that changed to more or less like building. We'll now build all the services in a matrix form, right? So it's building both the MySQL service, the backend service, the front-end service. It's going to build everything, in parallel, right? Instead of sequentially, okay? That's how sometimes you can also improve your CI/CD processes. There are ways you can use GitHub Action in a way that kind of enhances your workflow. Sometimes using reusable workflows, using reusable actions, or using matrix patterns where you can see front end has been built, probably because it's fast, it did build everything, uploaded it to ECR, it's still building the MySQL and the backend. But one thing we can actually go back and check is check our repo. So we saw something was built. So if we check front end, there's now a new image, which is good. If we check the backend, there is now a new image, which is also a good sign. If we now check our MySQL, there is also a new image, which is a good sign, right? So it means that our images have been built. So what it means is that we gave the developers, first of all, a way for them to take their local images and push it to ECR, right? So this build is completed, right? It built all the images. And then there is really the publish deployment manifest. That's one of the most important parts in this build process, because it's not just building all the containers, it's also publishing a deployment manifest, right? So what that is going to look like is that the first time we checked this app config, there was only the version 1 that we drafted. But now, if you actually go back to this environment and you see there's now a version 2, the point is that every time you build and you push, it creates a version. So in this case, backend has told us that, okay, I now have a new image version. And the image version is actually 1B144, right? And you can actually verify it. If you go to ECR and you go to repositories, you go to backend and you search, that's it, right? So we actually now have them updating app config when there is a change, right? Remember, that's actually what we wanted from the diagram. So we said when they push that change to GitHub, it should, upload the changes to ECR. But again, it should actually update app config, right? Because we want to use app config at the end of the day to be where users can actually deploy their stuff to. So that part is working. So that's a good sign. And you remember, for ECS, once the changes are in ECR, we're good to go, right? We're basically good to go because, yeah, you just need a container repository, whether it's Docker, whether it's ECR, or wherever you want to host your containers. Container orchestration tools like EKS, ECS, they just need your images to be in a container. If it's running it, it should be pretty much straightforward. Okay, so now that we have that already pushed to ECR, what's the next thing we want to do? So we've finished that part. The next thing we want to do, we need to set up an infra, all right? Remember, also it depends. Here I'm going different route, but ideally, once we bootstrapped, the next thing we're supposed to do is set up the infra, right? It's like a chicken and egg program, because even if we set up the infra, there won't be images, right, to build. But in this case, at least we want one image to be sent there, and then we can use that image to basically now launch our application. Okay, so what's the infra going to look like? The infra, there's nothing new about the infra. The only difference is that you've seen me do this architecture several times, right? Here I'm using EC2 instance. I'm doing Service Connect to basically connect the three services, basically. So front end to back end. And if you've not seen us do that from the console, check my previous videos. It's all there, right? The point is that the front end is the only thing that the ALB should be able to talk to. The ALB would reach out to the back end. The back end is going to reach out to the database. There's also one nuance here, and the fact that the ECS in this case and the MySQL, I'm not using Fargate. So I'm using EC2 instance to host the MySQL, right? And there's a reason for that. Because we are hosting our own this, and you want like an EBS backed volume and all of that. So EC2 is the launch type we're using here, but the other ones are basically using Fargate, right? What else? They basically have their number of tasks. They have their own task definition, because that's what determines where is the image going to be pulled from, and all those good stuff, right? But the point is, this is standard setup. If you followed me in the ECS series, you've seen how we've done things. So let's just play around what that looks like. So we're done with the application people. At least they've been able to get a change to ECR. That's all that matters to them. And there's already AppConfig that they can influence and then use that to deploy the application. So on the app, I think we've been able to more or less, like, we've tried, we've sorted them out. We need to sort ourselves out now, because we need to have an infra that is going to deploy the application in AWS, right? So the next thing we want to start thinking about is, let's go, what would that look like? So on the infrastructure side, we did work with, and that's where the concept of, in Terraform, there's a concept of modules. Modules are just basically a way you can arrange your stuff, like just arrange. So there's a module here for ALB. Very simple stuff. It's just basically using community. It's also using, so our module is using also the community ALB, and we're just passing in some variables. And that's IAC, basically. You're just defining your desired state, right? I want my ALB to be like this. It should be an application load balancer. It should have this listener. It should have, but the point people don't understand is that you need to know these things, how it translates to AWS, before you can write IAC for it, right? And that's what I always teach. I always teach you that this is how it's done in AWS. And then at some point, you just be using Terraform to declare. It's like declarative. I want to have an ALB that has this listener, that has this certificate, because you know how it is behind the scene. You know exactly what it translates to without IAC, right? Here, enable delete protection, because yes, you can actually lock your ALB so that it can be deleted. But this, honestly, if you look at this code, it's very easy to understand if you followed me for ALB. What again, the ECS cluster? ECS cluster, they're always very simple, right? You can basically just create an ECS cluster, very simple. And there is a module here that I created for, first of all, there is two kinds of deployment here. So there's one that is using EC2, and there's one that is using like ECS, basically. So there's like the ECS Fargate. So what it means is that we are giving it a database, and because your MySQL is going to mount its data volumes into like a storage. So we're giving it an EBS volume, right? So delete on termination, true. Some of these things you can influence them. Maybe you don't want it to be deleted when the machine terminates. Encrypted is true. These are all things you can play with. But the whole point is that we are creating an ECS service that is using the EC2 flavor as compared to the Fargate flavor, right? These are also things you can do from the console if you want, right? They are basic stuff. Here we're giving it a role, manage instance call for you to be able to SSM into the machine, right? Without using SSH. All that is also things that I've that I've taught at some point, right? And then there's also the Fargate, like I mentioned, the one that uses Fargate, right? So the one that uses the ECS Fargate type of thing, right? So we have that, and then there's just a couple of IAM roles, things like the task execution role. Remember, if you have to use ECS, the containers need to have permissions to do the things they need to do. Sometimes your services need to push file to S3. It has to have the permission. And again, your task execution, for example, if you need to read a secret, all that definitions is where you need a task role and a task execution role, right? If you followed me from the beginning when I started teaching ECS, we went through all that as a foundation, right? So we have the IAM setup, and then the VPC, one of the simplest VPC you're going to see there. We're basically just using a single NAT gateway just to reduce the cost, but it just giving it a set of CIDR, a set of availability zones, private subnet, public subnet, and that's it. It's going to give you a VPC, right? Remember, we're not going into the inner details. We know this is going to create like a route table, a subnet, blah, 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 all that. Those are information I think we know by now. So we're using this basically to bring to life an architecture we have without going into the lower level details, right? But if you are interested in lower level details, check the link on my bio. You will see videos that I've already created talking about the subject, okay? So we're good. And then once that is set up, we now have the main file itself. What is the main file basically doing? It's just basically composing all those modules together, right? And that's where the concept of like things like depends on comes in. Like you say, I need the VPC to be up first. When the VPC is up, bring the ALB. When the ALB is up, bring this. And that's how you set up the infra, right? When you check the code, that's what you're going to see. Again, a disclaimer, this code, I'm not saying this is the perfect code, right? The point is I'm using it to teach you a concept. You can actually, like I said, it's an open repo. You can clone this, you can make modification, you can wonder why this is like this, change it if you want to. But the whole idea is I want this to be something you can relate to it. You can reproduce, you can tear down if you want, you can even adjust it if you wanted, okay? But this is where I'm also going to be showing you one thing that is important, right? So we're using Service Connect, like as an option for us to connect, right? Remember that there are many options. We saw we saw using Route 53 as an option, using Cloud Map and Route 53. We also saw Service Connect as an option, using not using Route 53 this time, but just using Cloud Map, right? And that's what we have done here. One of the nuances that I also had to do was to more or less like, for example, for MySQL, because we are going to be hosting it in EC2, I had to change the HTTP, the ports, basically, not to use HTTP and just not use that. I was having issues with that. So that's the only thing that I had to change. So the port for MySQL is not HTTP, okay? But again, if we're doing that in the console, you will. But some of these things, they also have comments for you to see the rationale behind it and all that. But it's simple. If you actually look at the source code, you can relate with it. But again, I don't want you to just look at the source code. I also want you to be able to do these things outside the source code. And I think that's what we've been doing before now. Okay, good. So with that, this thing brings up, you can see there's a lot of depends on. So depends on this, depends on that. So what are we going to do next? We're going to go back to, so we're in Bootstrap. We may not need Bootstrap again. So we're just now going to go into their infrastructure. So this is where we are. And then we're going to be doing, I think I'm going to be doing env and just be sure that I have my profile set here. So it is set to my lab. So what I'm going to be doing is just do Terraform apply and see what I get, okay? So I'm going to be doing Terraform. Remember, all I'm trying to bring up is the architecture that I've already explained to you. So here, we're just basically going to be bringing up, we're not bringing up CloudFront, okay? We're not adding CloudFront. We're starting from here. But if you watch the last video, that's exactly what we did with CloudFront. We added CloudFront on top of that load balancer. In this case, I'm not doing that. I'm basically doing ALB, going to ECS. The ECS will go to the backend will go to MySQL. But the whole idea is we need to replicate what the guy is seeing in his local machine, right? Because they could see this application, right? I know we don't have like the delay, but this is like that to-do app they are seeing locally. They should also be able to see it on AWS. And that's what we're trying to make. So if we go here, it says it's going to create a number of things like 53 resource, right? So 55 resource to create. So we're just going to do yes. We're going to do yes, okay? And I'll go into the console and show you exactly the things that you need to care about, right? I'll show you. But these are things we've already discussed before. We've discussed them before. But I'm just going to also show you, call them out so that you are aware of it, okay? So we're going to bring up the infra. So what the infra is going to be doing is setting up the VPC for us. And remember, all we have up to this point is developers were able to push their change, and we were able to generate, like a, manifest for it. Right? So we basically have their change. We just haven't been able to launch it just yet. Okay. So with that, let's see how our infra is doing. So it's bringing up stuff. I'm just going to go into the AWS console and show you what that is translating to. So we'll start with a VPC. So the VPC is being created. So if you go VPC and we check, like I said, the videos. If you check the link on my bio, the video is going to be uploaded. That's number one. Secondly, if you're following me on this journey, all the source code, since I created my lab and everything, even my website, the blog content is completely here. So if you go to this lab, you're going to see everything I've created since I joined, like creating, streaming here on TikTok or teaching. So There's a lot of lab here that you can benefit from, right? Whether it's on the agent core side of things with AI, yeah, pretty much things that we've done together. Okay. And again, this one will also be added there. You can also see the video is going to be uploaded. You can watch it. You can follow along with the source code. The whole idea is just so that if you're following me, you're learning, you should be able to reproduce these things that I'm reproducing. Okay. Or just so you know, you have to create this. You have to more or less like create a version to it for you to be able to test these things out. There's no way you can run it against my repo. Okay, you have to pretty much create your own version. Okay, but the point is we have a new VPC. So if you go here, there's like the VPC created for. We're not going to focus on VPC. VPC is standard stuff for us in this group. And if you don't still understand the VPC till now, reach out to me. But the point is we have an ECS cluster that is coming up gradually. And in the ECS cluster, we can look at the service, but the most important thing is look at the task definitions, right? That's the core thing. You need to know your task definition. There are a bunch of them that is here that I've used in the past. But the point is, if you click one of them and you check JSON, that's where you begin to see, okay, what is it making reference to? It's making reference to backend, it's making reference to latest, and it's okay for now because we are running it from the infra, right? Running it from Terraform. As time goes on, the developer should be able to influence which version of the image is running. So it's fine. You can see the port mappings. You can see things like the secrets. It's making reference to secret manager. Okay. I think that's why that is in our diagram. It's one of the services we're using that is external to ECS. Okay. So it knows how to pull in the secret and use it. What else are we doing? We have our task role. These are the important things you need to know about ECS. There's like a task role. And there's also the execution rule, right? One actually controls the permission once the service is running. Sometimes your service needs to write to S3. Sometimes your service needs to save data to like, what do you call it? To like a DynamoDB table, right? You need to give it the permission to do that. All that is set up correctly. What else? This is the CPU, the memory that we did mention. Like I mentioned, for backend, we're using Fargate, right? But if we go back and check the task definition and we look at for the one for MySQL, it's going to be a bit different. If you check JSON, that's different. If you go, you can see the compatibility we're using EC2, right? The point is we want to have like a managed EBS volume that the MySQL is going to be hosted on. And again, if you have not joined, when I started this, I said there are cases like this where you're not using a managed service. So think about it. This could be your dev environment. It could be your sandbox environment where you feel it's not like a critical environment that you should be using a managed service, and you're okay. The changes in your MySQL containers, okay? So you see flavors like that as part of your journey, right? But one thing I also need to show you is if you go to services, so if you go to the clusters and I refresh this one, there is like 3 services. Not sure why. Okay, probably we still have this is running. It's fine. We'll just apply it again. It looks like services independent, blah, blah, blah. We're going to try and run it again. Not sure why we're getting that error, but we're going to try to create it another one more time. And it's going to create, and it has created. So what we can actually go back to do, we'll go back to where we're coming from. We will now go back to, what is it called? We'll go to ECS, we'll refresh, we should have 3 services. But I'm really particular about the MySQL, right? If we go to a service, right? So I'll try to update the service. One thing you should understand is that, remember, there was a time I focused on deployment options, like how do you deploy? Right now, we're not really talking about deployment. So if you're ever thinking about my deployment videos, watch the ones I've created in the past. What's rolling update? What's blue-green? What's canary? What's linear? I broke it down like to the best of my ability, right? But one thing I need you to pay attention to is the fact that we're going to use Service Connect, right? That's one way your services can talk to themselves in ECS, and you get a lot of other special benefits from it, right? But the point is, it is using a namespace, and that namespace is actually in CloudMap, right? CloudMap is a different service. There's so many things we can do with CloudMap, but here I'm just showing you basically. And you can create it as a client server, or you can just create it as a client. It depends on maybe connects to other services in the namespace, or it can connect and can also be connected to. So it depends. And here you can see MySQL, the port is this. I think we've done this. And then it keeps logs, right? So you can actually see the logs it's creating, right? We're not using service discovery, but we did see it's an option, right? So you can actually use service discovery using Route 53. In this case, it's not going to use Route 53 for us. It's just basically going to use CloudMap and then Service Connect, okay? We're not doing auto-scaling right now. Auto-scaling is also a thing, right? Right now, yeah, we're not really at the auto-scaling side of things, but you can actually add auto-scaling to whatever you're doing in terms of like check up a metric and use that to scale. We're not. again, we don't need a load balancer in this case because the MySQL is not going to be load balanced, and we don't need to see it from the front end. But if you go to the other services, like the front end application, that's when you're going to see if I try to update the service. One thing you notice is it has similar elements, but on the load balancing side, it has a load balancer that is connected to it, right? And if I go back to if I click the target group of the load balancer, and I do, for example, you can see 2 are healthy. So it means if I actually launch the load balancer right now, I should be able to reach that service. Okay, so we're coming up gradually. What else? Every other thing is pretty much standard stuff. They're also using Service Connect because that's the whole idea. We still want the services to talk to themselves in friendly ways. Let's see. So if you go to the front end and you go to task definition that it's using, so let's see the task definition. So if we go to task definition, let's go to the front end task definition, the latest one. We go to JSON. One thing you should take note of is that if you check the environment variable, for example, let's see, it is maybe not here. So we don't really, I think there is, let me just do environment. So environment, yeah, so there's really no environment here. Probably that's going to be an issue for us, but it's fine because it looks like the first time when we deploy this, the environment is not set up. But if we actually go to the way we want it, right, the environment is actually set up here on the backend side of things. But right now, it's not actually set up. So we will need to actually prove our entire workflow, right? Right now, we just deployed it from an infra side of point of view, but I don't think the connection is going to work exactly how we want it, and we're going to revisit it, okay? So right now, the environment is set up correctly here, but if you check the task definition here, it's not, right? It's not, and the reason is because the main definition is actually in the AppConfig, right? We want the application developers to be able to control the environment variables that they supply, right? They can edit it as they want, okay? So let's see, we can refresh these. We can go to the ECS cluster again. So go to clusters. It says 5 is running. So you say 5 things are running. So everything looks cool. The question is, will it work? So let's go to the front end. Let's look for the load balancer. The load balancer is here. And then let's actually pick the URL of the load balancer and see if it's actually going to work. HTTP, remember, I'm actually doing it on, it did work. It's going to work because the front end itself is healthy, right? It is healthy, but I know it's not going to work because the integration is not complete. And the reason is just because when you see, I'm sure it's going to say it's trying to load items and it's not going to work, right? Fail to load items, right? And if we, this is also where you can troubleshoot. So let's assume you just had this running at the beginning, you don't know what is wrong. That's also why there are logs, right? So you can, front end is working. So what is not happening? It looks like the back. So we can actually go and check their logs individually. So we go to cluster, we go to MySQL, we check the logs. Everything looks fine. So MySQL itself is saying, I'm ready and I'm receiving traffic, right? So my bind address is good. I'm good. Let's see, it did stopping, blah, blah, blah. It did set up. Let's see. I'm just trying to be sure that receive shutdown. I'm not sure if this is today. This looks like it's today. But it says healthy. So let's just give it. Let's see what goes. Let's see. I'm just trying to be sure it created the user, the setup user. But it's fine. We'll come back to this. So what we can also do is that we can also check the logs. This one, it looks like it said it's fine. Then we can also check the backend log to see what it's trying to do. So we tried, probably the front end will try to reach the backend, but you can see, try to connect to the database, and the database is also refusing connection, right? So in this case, my guess is that the initial user has not been created, because if I actually go back to the, again, if I go back to the task definition and I go to the one for MySQL, if I go back to MySQL and I check the latest one, and I also check the environment that we just searched for, let's see. So I think there's an issue where the Terraform, when it comes up, it doesn't give us the right environment variable. But if we actually go to deployment manifest and you check the database environment, you see that we actually provide the MySQL database, the MySQL user that is supposed to use, but all that is not set in the task definition, right? Task definitions are very, very important because it's like the blueprint for your images, or it's like the blueprint for your task, right? Which are actually containers. Right now, I know the problem. So we don't have a perfect solution here, but let's go back to our architecture. So now we have an infra. ALB is set up, the front end, the back end, the MySQL, they're all set up, right? It's just that the connection is not working. We need one more capability to give the users, and that's the fact that we want the developers to be able to deploy their changes. So let's assume we've set up the infra now, but it's not working, and the developers are like, okay, what's going on? You need to deploy your stuff. And that's why there is a second action that I created there. What that second action is going to do is that it's going to ask a developer, what do you want to do? You want to deploy your change? Okay, pick the application ID, pick the, so there's a number of things you can specify, more or less like which environment are you deploying to, which application ID are you using, which profile ID, which app config version do you want to use? And then do you want to force deployment if you want to? So let's try that out now. It's already there. The action is actually there. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So if we go here, we go to actions. What that looks like is this one. So if you go here, this is really the one to deploy. I can actually, so what we can do is the file is here. If you actually want to see it here, it's basically simple stuff. But the point is that it's going to take the manifest that we have, and then it's going to use that to deploy your services. Okay, that's basically what it's going to do. So what we can do is we can try to run this workflow. Again, this workflow is actually, this one is a manual workflow, but you can automate it if you want to. You can say when there's a new app config configuration that changed or something happened there, you can basically wire an action that executes this GitHub action. I hope you know you can go from GitHub action to AWS. You can also go from AWS to GitHub action. All that is permitted. It's all, if you want to automate things, it depends on from which direction. So here, right now, I just have like a manual workflow for you to click, but you can also make this in such a way that when changes in app config, if there's something that changes, then you trigger something that more or less like just triggers a GitHub action for you, right? So there's many possibilities. Okay, I won't show you. It's going to be hard to show you all the possibilities. You just have to also have an infra mindset to think of many ways that you can do things. And sometimes it's always at the end of the day, it depends on what the company wants, what works for the organization. One thing might work for one organization, it may work for a different organization. Okay, so what we can do is go to this workflow, right? So we'll go to this particular one. So we'll go to basically this workflow. I think that's where we are, right? So we'll go to GitHub Actions. We'll go to this workflow. So what we can do is we can run the workflow. And this is where it's asking me. So it's exactly what I showed you in the code. But the whole idea is it's asking me the application ID. It's asking me the environment ID. It's asking me the profile ID. And then it's asking me the version. Okay. So we're going to get all those information from AWS. So let's find those information. So we'll go here. We'll go to AppConfig. We know this one is the one that works, right? So the version 2. So what we are going to do, we start from the top. We get our application ID. So we're just going to go here to application ID. I think that's the first thing we're going to paste. We're also going to go to our configuration ID. So config, that means we'll click inside. And then what it means is that we're going to be looking for our configuration, our profile ID. We'll pick that. We'll go here and say that's the profile ID. And then we're actually going to go, the next thing is going to be the environment. So we'll click this. We'll go to environment. We'll click on this one. We'll click on this one. This is the environment ID, right? Okay, cool. So once we have the environment ID, we're going to go back here and paste the environment ID. So app environment ID, configuration ID, profile ID. And then which version do we want to deploy? This is not infra person doing this now. It's assumed this is a developer, right? Because now you want to deploy your change. The whole idea is you're giving them the ability for them to do whatever they want to do on their own. So we can do that. And then we need to choose which version. So the developer will be like, I want to deploy a particular version. So you can see, for example, if you go to the app config, where were we just now? I thought we were there. Here, and you go to like this, and you go to the profiles, you go to the deployment manifest. So version 2 is the latest, right? So we'll go back and tell them we want to deploy version 2. We'll do version 2 here. And then, did I lose all those changes? Okay, I didn't lose it. So we're going to run the workflow, right? Basically, what the workflow is just going to do is it will try to deploy the services, okay? So if you take note, our services right now is not working well. And the reason is just because the environment variable does not match what should be. So we're going to trigger this. It's also going to do a matrix again. And the whole idea is a matrix is basically going to deploy the services like in parallel as opposed to sequentially. But it depends on you. Maybe this is something you do during off-peak, or it depends. There are many other things that can happen as part of deployment. What I'm just showing you is a use case, but use cases always changes. Depends on how sensitive your applications are to many things and all that. But if we look at the backend, for example, it says it's basically waiting for the backend to be deployed. So what are we going to check? So what we can do now is let's go back and see the last revision we're looking at was 23. So let's look at tax definition and let's look backend. Maybe I was looking at the wrong one, but let's see the tax definition for 19. Although I don't know if this was just created, but let's see JSON and scroll down. We will know once we check the environment. Yeah, you can see now the environment looks correct, right? The first time we checked it, this wasn't correct, right? So, but now because of that new application that we deployed, it actually used AppConfig to determine what to push here, and it's now using the right one. And if you actually go to the cluster and you go to this cluster, yeah, you see some pending changes, right? So pending. If you go to backend, for example, you see one is pending, and that's the new revision, the 19th revision, which is the one we triggered from GitHub Action, just so you know. So this one is here, it's 19. If you check that revision, the 19th revision, that's the one that has all the environment variables that we need, right? So these environment variables, the DB name, the DB username, the host, the DB port. And also if we go and check the database side of things, so we go to cluster, we go to DB, let's see, we will also see that it has task revision 24, right? So 24 is the provisioning 23 because it needs 24 to be up. 24 is actually the latest one. How you know is that if I open 23 and I open 24, 23 is the one that we saw. It didn't have the right environment variable, right? So the environment variable was empty, okay? But once we clicked from GitHub Action and we go to JSON and we check the environment variable, you see it's different, right? This one will have the MySQL database name, it will have MySQL user and the app user, right? And this is what will help us initialize MySQL properly, okay? So let's wait for it to come up, and if that is the case, we will see what happens next. So let's go to clusters and see 4 are still pending. MySQL is now trying to come up, right? So the first one I think has been let go, and then a new one is coming up, so it's pending. This one has been stopped. This one is pending. We can check the logs. No logs are created yet. So we can just go to the clusters and wait and refresh. I'll go here and see. This one is 2 tasks running. The deployment is still in progress. Just so you know, this deployment was triggered from GitHub Action, okay? And that's why if you actually go to GitHub Action, you will notice that it's still saying it's still in progress. The point is that it's waiting on ECS to finish its deployment. So maybe there could be something here that you can say, okay, when this deployment is done, let me know, like signal, let me know, like send me a notification that says maybe Slack channel, maybe email, whatever you want to put in there for you to know that the deployment is done. You can have that, right? But let's continue. So this is still running. These ones are, it looks like they're fine now, but let's see the MySQL one. So the task, this is still running. Let's see what's the health status. It looks like it's healthy. Let's actually go to this task and check the logs. So one thing you will notice is that, let me see, switching to the dedicated MySQL user. They did actually create a new user. Not really sure in this case. Let's see what is going on. So in the 5 minutes ago, let's see. So there was an initialization that happened. But let's see. Let's give it some time. So what we can do is we can so what we can do is that we can, so it's running. So the services are running. The services are here. They're all running now. But again, I don't still think this app is going to work. And so I'm going to do like a hard refresh and check again and see what goes wrong. So remember the first time the config wasn't correct, but now we've added the config. So let's see what's going to go on. It still will not work, and I suspect probably what's the problem. And the problem is because the first configuration happened, there was no initialization on the user. Ideally, when we bootstrap for the first time, we're supposed to create our first, our first MySQL user, right? When we give it the environment variable. But in this case, it did not create it. So a good way we can basically rescue that situation is to go here and look at the instance it's running. We're just going to remember one is powered by EC2, right? The other one is Fargate. So here, what I can actually do, I think if you see, for example, you go to volumes here, we can do volumes. So if you go to the storage, you go to volumes. Both of them have configuration to say delete on termination. This one does not have delete on termination. So what we can basically do is we can basically just I actually wanted to create a new EC2 instance. So I'm going to terminate this one. Okay. So delete the EBS volume. This. So I'm going to terminate because I wanted to actually create the EC2 instance again and pretty much bring up a new volume. Okay. So we're going to do that. Remember, these things are always, if you're using EC2, it's going to be backed by an auto-scaling group. It's going to bring up a new instance after a while. If it's terminating this, it's definitely going to also tear down the cluster, the MySQL. So this one is going to tear it down, right? Because the provisioning, right? Because we let go of the machine. So what we can actually do is we can go and check for that instance. We can check the volumes. Let's see which volume is that. Some of these ones are available. When you see something like this that are available, it just shows that you can actually get rid of, nothing is using them, right? So I'm just going to do delete here. I'm going to delete these ones. And then let me look at that instance and show the one that is deleting, and then check that storage. Let me see. I want to see that volume. So is this one? The volume is actually not there again, so it's fine. What is using this one? So initializing this one. Let's see. So this one is the first, I think it's initializing. So if you go back to instance, I'm sure it's bringing up a new EC2 instance again. If you refresh, there is one that is running now, right? And that's the beauty of using more or less like Fargate or ECS. The fact is that behind the scene, you basically need machines that are running and your containers are actually launched in those instances, right? So if we go back to our task, we go to MySQL. I know what I'm looking out for. I want that. So it's this one is gone. The first one is gone. This is the second one I'm waiting for. We're going to give it some time. So our database is not initialized properly, and that has to happen, okay? So let's refresh and see what's going on. So none is running. Let's go to the task again. The other ones are fine. The other services, so the backend, the front end, they're good. MySQL is just what we need to set up correctly. So we'll check the task. It's this one that is still pending. We can check the logs and see there is nothing happening just yet. Let's give it some time. Let's give it some time to come up, okay? Okay, good. So this is what I was trying to look at for, okay? So the first one you can see is creating the app user, right? Because that's the user we need for the application to connect, right? So it's creating the database. It has to create all that. It has to initialize it, right? This is why you need to check the logs, because in this case, the first time we didn't really create it well, but now we just created it, right? So we've done that. Let's go back to the logs. Let's go to task and see what's going on. It's activating. It looks like the status is healthy. What can we do? Let's now refresh again and see what goes. Maybe we just need to give it some time to register itself properly. But let's close this. Let's refresh and see. It's still activating, so probably this might still not work. Okay, it looks like we're live now, right? So we're live. So this is similar to what is here. So let's actually go back to the local development and let's do Ctrl+C. And let's go back to where we were before. So Bootstrap is where we were in Docker Compose for like the full stack app. We go to Docker Compose. We change this back to what it was, and we do Docker Compose up again, right? The whole idea is now we need to show like local development, and then we need to show exactly what it is in AWS, right? That's the point. So let's try something. So it's up. This is still local, right? So if I go back and I refresh, this is local. So this is local environment, and this is production. I mean, I don't know which environment you want to call it, but this is now AWS, right? And the good thing, you can say new item, right? Just exactly how local was working, right? And we can add a new item, it's there, right? And we can delete, right? But again, if you remember, we wanted a way for us to be able to influence the application and give developers the ability to use AppConfig to basically influence what is deployed. So one of it is they should be able to change their environment variable. So in this case, maybe I want to turn off like the ability for the application itself to be able to delete, I don't want to be able to delete items. What it means is that I can go back here, I can go to AppConfig, just so you know, you can actually create versions of your configuration, right? So if I go here and I go to deployment, I can create a new version from the existing version. So use the same container, use everything, but now maybe I want to disable allow delete. I can set this to false, right? So I can say false, and then I can create a hosted, more or less like a new version. This is now version 3, right? What was deployed was version 2. So can we try a new deployment and confirm that this delete option is gone? Let's try that. So what we can do is we can go back to our GitHub, right? So that is where we will go to. We'll go to GitHub. Where is GitHub now? So this is where GitHub, you can see this is green, right? It shows you that I deployed everything. So I deployed backend, frontend, MySQL service, and everything is fine now, right? This could be different repos. It could be different repos. It could be different workflows. It just depends on how you're set up. Here, I'm using one workflow to control everything. But let's go back and run. I'm not going to run it again. This time I'm going to run the action again, but I'm now trying to deploy a new configuration version. So I'm going to run it, workflow. This time, I think I'm going to use D0 because I know that's really what it is. So it's the profile ID D6, right? I think it's the one that is configuration profile ID D6. So we're just going to go back there and you do this D6. So this is so we'll just use the last one. Now we're going to deploy version 3. And then we're just going to run the workflow. So what do you think we're going to get? So the point is that now we've given, so now this is a developer trying to make their own deployment. They don't need me. They don't need me on the DevOps team. They basically should be able to go in there, change their environment variables, especially the things we give them to be able to control. And if you check those things on AppConfig are basically things like they should be able to increase their own CPU, their own memory. They should be able to change some of the environment variables. They can also change the image version they want to. Maybe they went through the back door and uploaded an image and they wanted to quickly test that. They can actually go there and change maybe some of these things and then push it, right? And then run the workflow to run it. But now the good thing is that our environment is set up correctly. So we don't need to do any manual setting up again. Ideally, this should actually deploy now. And we should see that here there's no longer room for you to delete any change, right? So let's give it some time. So we can also go to ECS again, go to the cluster, it's active. If we go into any of the service, you see that the task that is running is currently, you can also see the task definition. So this is 19, 20 is trying to come up, right? How do you know? If you check 19 and you check 20, you will see the difference. 19 would have allow delete to be true. So if you see the environment variable here, for this one will be, let's scroll down to find it. For 19, allow delete, no, this is backend, right? No, we're actually looking for front-end definition. So we'll go to cluster, we'll go to this cluster, we'll go to the front end, and in front end, there's 19 trying to come up, but right now we're actually running on 18. So let's check 18, and then also let's check 19, right? So 18, if you check JSON, what do you notice is that allow delete is true, but the 19 that is coming up, if you check JSON and you do allow delete is false. So that's the one we're trying to deploy, right? And the whole idea is that, what it means is that, developers can say, okay, we want to use environment variable to influence how the application. Remember, environment variables in this case is different from application configuration. If you're a developer, you know the concept of feature flags. You can also use AppConfig for feature flags. Here, we're using it on the infra side to basically influence how developers can influence their application that is already in the cloud and how they can influence the more or less like the how the service is running. So things like changing environment variables, secrets, we don't let them manage because secret is an infra thing, I feel. Things like mount points, you don't want them to care about that. But sometimes I think environment variable is something you can give them. Things like CPU, you don't want them to be disturbing you. Oh, I need to increase the CPU, I need to increase the RAM. You don't want them to be disturbing. You can give them all that to do. And then the things that are really infra related, okay, we want to use a secret in AWS. We want to mount additional mount points. All that can be things that falls on the infra line, okay? But we're still in line with our diagram. So if you think about our diagram, we're in line. We now have like developer experience, being able to see things using Docker Compose. We now have a workflow where they push their images to ECR. We also give them the pipeline that says, the pipeline is more or less like a workflow that says, basically use AppConfig to influence your application that is already deployed, right? While we maintain the infra side of things, right? So all that is it. So what we can do is we can also check the deployment that is happening. The front end has already been deployed. Let's see what other things are going on. So this one, let's see for MySQL, there's 25. Which one is running? Another thing, I mean, this is 25 that is running. 25 is this. Maybe it has changed. Maybe it has actually deployed. Let's see something. And one thing also I need to mention is that in this case, let's also think about deployment. If you remember when I was teaching about deployment, I spent a lot of time teaching about blue, green, canary. There's a reason for that. So if we, for example, go to the service, we're going to check the deployment when it's done. But I want to show you something. If we go and check the update service and we check how MySQL is being deployed, there's something you're going to notice. And how you're going to notice is that you're going to see the rolling update. Can you see the main running task? we said it could be 0. And we said the max running task could be 100%, right? The point is that when you say max running task, and we say we only want one replica, that means one max running is only, if you were there when I was doing the max, it means we're saying max that can be running can be 1, but the min can also be 0. So what it means is that for it to actually bring up a new MySQL pod, it's going to actually get rid of the first one and then bring a new one. The reason is because we're using EC2 type here, and the machine that we're giving it is not powerful enough to host 2 containers, right? It's not powerful enough because we're using like a T3 instance. So this is good, but this obviously depends on your rollout setup. Sometimes you don't want this. You don't want a situation whereby it has to, take away the container and then bring up a fresh container. That would be some downtime. Some people allow it. Like I said, this is like testing like an environment that is maybe dev, and people just want to test in AWS. You are not really. This is not like production. Maybe production, there's a flag that says if it's dev, use MySQL hosted, a Docker hosted MySQL. But if it is prod, use RDS or use Aurora. Okay, there'll be environments like that. But this is where you begin to see where even your rolling update, you can influence how the deployment happens. Because in this case, it's one machine. It can have, it should be able to support multiple Docker containers. But in this case, we don't want multiple. We only want one because the machine is not powerful enough to have multiple. So the only way I can support having multiple containers running is for me to bump the EC2 size to a bigger size so that I can take multiple containers. Okay, so if you're ever watching this video, just know that there are some decisions like this that were made. And that's why you need to understand the rolling update options that you can have, canary, blue, green, all those kind of things. Okay, so when you watch this video and you're trying it out, just know that these are some of the nuances that you see. Let's go back to our cluster. Our cluster, I'm not sure what it's still saying, but it looks like everything is fine. We want to believe that it has rolled out the new change. How do we test? We go here and we refresh, right? Now you can see all of a sudden that delete button is gone, right? All that was influenced by the developer. So I didn't have to do this for them. On the infra side, we're busy with a lot of other things, right? We're busy with a lot of things. So I didn't have to do this for them, but they were able to influence their own development. They're basically how the application is developed, right? Cool. I think this is really it, right? This is really it's a lot for one class, right? It's just a lot. Just so you know, the videos, I'm going to upload the videos for a lot of you that have been saying thumbs up in terms of what you're getting. The videos is going to be uploaded. Make sure you're part of the link on my bio so that you can know when the video is uploaded and you can see it. Like I said, this source code is here. So everything I'm using here, you can see it exactly how it is. You can reuse it if you want to. What do I need to do? Nothing much. All I need to do is tear down, right? Again, I've not really, maybe the next time I'm going to come in here is basically we can talk about the last things we can add here, right? Things like, okay, what is left? Do you want to add dashboard? What is that going to look like? Because this, honestly, this is like full-fledged. We've gone through like the length and breadth of ECS now with just some little tiny details that we may still be missing, but all that is something that we can go through and again, and I'll just show you what else we can add and just to finalize it. Pretty much, maybe that's what the next class is going to be about the next time we meet again. Okay. But while that is done, I'm just going to tear down, right? I don't really care about the Docker Compose. I mostly care about the infrastructure. So I'm going to go one level below. So the bootstrap level. So I'm just going to say CD to bootstrap. Okay. No, I think I need to delete the infrastructure first. So I'm going to do Terraform. When we're done, you basically need to tear things down, right? But that's the good thing about using IAC because you can bring up, you can tear down. Okay, so I'm just going to do Terraform destroy, and it's going to tell me the things it wants to destroy. And then I'm going to do yes, right? The good thing is we move from having a local change, right? Simple item manager, blah, 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 to something we could see in the cloud. It doesn't mean you can add new item. The last thing we only just disabled deleting existing items, right? But you can't add a new item, right? You just can't delete. And all that was influenced by the developers, right? By changing the env values, okay? With that said, I think we're good. So I'm actually fine. We can just tear down. Again, remember, if we go back to the diagram, just one last point to touch on. We didn't really take this further, right? So we stopped at the LLD. But if you watch the last video, that was really what we did. We exposed this in front of CloudFront, gave it a friendly domain name, and we're able to reach it, right? So it's not hard. We can always do that. There is a video also if you can watch that shows exactly that. So I'm going to be tearing down, just do yes. So once you're done with this practical, you already understand everything that is going on. Just tear down stuff, right? Tear down. So the two things we basically did was to bring this up and bring the bootstrap up so we can always tear it down. So with that tearing down, I think the only thing I need to do is ECR will not delete itself automatically. But let's wait actually for the clusters to start going down. So the clusters, if I go there, the services are deleting. There are now 2 services instead of 3. So if we give it time, it's going to tear down. Okay, it's going to tear down. It's going to tear down. There's a lot with ECS, and I think I've always mentioned that ECS is good. It's a very good foundation for you to understand container orchestration in AWS. A lot of companies uses it, and that's the reason is just because yes, you're going to see a lot of ECS. Kubernetes, people are still adopting Kubernetes. Kubernetes is still going to get popular as time goes on, but if you're joining the company today, be sure that they have one ECS thing running there. Okay, so as much as a lot of people are falling in love trying to learn Kubernetes, ECS is like the major orchestration platform in AWS, and in a lot of small environments, they don't use Kubernetes. So if you understand ECS, you're still going to stand. You'll be able to support a lot of workloads out there. Okay, so it's no knowledge lost at all. No knowledge lost. If you were learning ECS, if you want to be cloud engineer platform, ECS is like very, very good for you to understand end to end. And then you can pretty much, employ that concept in other areas that you want to. Okay, so let's see. The services are still deleting. Let me just be sure what's actually deleting now. I think it's deleting the capacity provider, which is good. Let's check the cluster. It's draining. So 1 is draining. The point is that you can see how we went straight from just running Terraform apply, and everything came up. We didn't have to do anything manual, right? So a lot of it, the background work itself is knowing what is behind, architecting it, going through the architectural decisions we are making, understanding what should connect to what. Once all that is in place, and then we write the infra side, although there's still a number of components, right? You have to think about like how will deployment happen, the cadence, how often that would be, would there be downtime, all this. These are things that you basically would see. For those who are asking for one-on-one, yes, if you really want to find me on one-on-one, then you have to find me on TopMates. That's where you see me. So you find me on TopMates. I'm rebranding my website. So basically when my website is out, people used to tell me, I don't usually see the link. I don't see the link for me to find you on TopMates. But if once my website is rebranded, it should be easy for you to see all the places you can find me. Okay, so but if you really want to catch me one-on-one, then that will be on TopMates. That's where I do more or less like tailored advice, or like if you want to talk to me one-on-one, that's, I speak to the public, but there you can talk to me like on a personal level where we can, I can basically tailor things to where you are and what you're trying to solve. But you can see it's tearing down our services gradually. It's going to do all that. And once it's done, I think on the so once this is done, I think I'm just going to go to ECR. And then what I'm going to do with ECR is basically go to the repositories. I'm going to delete our images. Surprisingly, we only pushed images just once, right? So I'm going to delete this image. That's the only way you can delete a repo without deleting the images to allow you. So I'm just going to go here. And I also like to add this cleanup to part of the video so that people can actually watch it and also learn to clean up stuff, okay? So that you won't say, oh, I followed your tutorial and I forgot some things running, okay? So it should be part of your practice. So once the repositories are deleted, the clusters are going down. Let's see clusters. There's still one service that is running there. This is the MySQL service. But if we go here, the task is still running. Probably steering it one after the other. So still trying to get rid of it. So let's give it some time. Once I'm done, I'm going to open the house for questions. And if you want to send in a request, you can while I'm still here. If you know, I've not been here for like 2 weeks, so usually I'm not always here. So whenever you see me here, take advantage of it. There is a lot you can benefit from just being part of this community. But if you know, whenever I come here, I'm always interested in helping people learn, grow. I've done a lot in AWS. I was an engineer. I've done DevOps. I've done cloud. I've done platforming. I've done a lot. So. And out of the wealth of my experience, I do come here once in a while to share, to teach. So take advantage of it whenever you see me, especially if you want to ask me questions. I'm not always here. You won't always find me here, okay? But whenever you see me here, take advantage of it. The whole idea is I want us to build in the open like this, create a community for ourselves. The videos will always be available for you to watch. I think I did share the lab. The labs are going to be available. You can try them out yourself. So everything that I did, honestly, I think I've said it a lot of times. Don't watch videos and don't practice. It's like a waste of your time, right? People, they want to come into cloud or DevOps or this thing. They just watch videos and they watch videos, they move. They watch videos, they move. It doesn't really give you any advantage. The only way you can grow in this field is be a builder, all right? So watch videos, practice. Make sure you understand why something works, right? You have to practice it. You have to be able to prove it end to end by understanding the architecture, understanding how the solution fits together. And honestly, that's where you are starting your journey. But not just watching videos and not really doing anything. It doesn't, let's see what our cleanup is doing so far. Cluster, yeah, our services are gradually cleaning. Now there are no services. So we're good. One other thing is that I know for the bootstrap, it's going to be hard for us to delete the bootstrap because we need to clean up the configuration. So one thing I'm going to do is delete the versions. We need this for us to be able to delete, tear down the bootstrap. Okay, so all the versions are gone and this is still tearing down. So we're just going to give it some time. Once it's done, we'll delete the bootstrap and then we should be good. We should be good. Right now, localhost is still going to work. Localhost is our developer experience, right? So how they are testing it locally, and then AWS is really where we've taken the solution to. But now because we've turned things down, it's not going to open again, right? So you should see that it's actually a real example we're using. It wasn't like a mimicked example, okay? With that out of the way, let's see how we're doing with the cleanup. This is still deleting. Sometimes it takes time, but let's see clusters. The cluster is still here. It's still draining one service or what? Yeah, it's probably still draining the MySQL task. Still draining the task, but we'll go to cluster, refresh. I think it's the EC2. So if you go to EC2, again, remember there are two, there are flavors of ECS, right? Fargate, AWS will manage the compute for you. EC2, you have like a more or less like a template of the machine that AWS should launch the containers into, right? So those are the two flavors you can have. And we basically used both, right? Fargate, we had MySQL, we used EC2. So if we go to EC2, for example, instances, and we check here, one EC2 instance is still running. I'm not sure if that is not just draining just yet. I think it's still trying to tear it down. So let's check the task. So there's task. Let's see which task is still running state. None is running. Stopped. All of them have been stopped. Yeah, but if we give it time, sometimes maybe it's just me. Just sometimes you want things to move very fast. But if you give it time, it's going to tear everything down as expected, and then we should be good to go. Yeah, because it was growing a bit longer, but you should also understand that as part of this, you get metrics that is given to you. We've not really talked about things like this way you can see your memory utilization, your CPU utilization. You can check things to see how your services are doing. This at the cluster level, you can do it at the instance level, you can do it at the service level, right? So whenever somebody say, oh, my service is restarting or something is going wrong, you can actually tell us. When somebody says, oh, we need to increase the CPU, or they increase CPU beyond, we give them the possibility to do that. But sometimes you as the infra side, you're actually keeping an eye on those things. You have metrics that is checking to see if maybe we just provision so much memory, so much CPU, and you're not being used, because here you can see your utilization rate, right? Here you can see we're around that 40-something%. It's always good you are using it, right? But it's not going to be nice where you provision something and then for like the last 1 month, you're basically using it at 18%. You're wasting money, right? So these are places you can see. There are many things you can do to see. You can see for backend. You can have an alarm that says, okay, if something, like MySQL, we know in this case MySQL is critical. We don't want it to jump about less than one instance of MySQL is running, right? So maybe you care about those tasks. Sometimes you want to see desired versus running. All those things are metrics that are there for you, right? That you can actually build alarms from, right? Whether it's from CloudWatch integrated, or you can pipe these things to Prometheus and then use Grafana basically to notify yourself. But I'm going to show you what that looks like next time. We won't build that, but I'm just going to show you like what it takes for you to have like a end-to-end, thinking about monitoring as part of this solution and extending it further, because those are really what is expected of you. If you go for an interview, you're trying to understand more or less like how changes move from like local development to like GitHub to like how it integrates to AWS, and what happens. What are the day two operations? What are you monitoring? What are you looking out for? What are the alerts, thresholds you care about? Not every metrics matter, but sometimes depending on the service, there are metrics that matters, and you have to pay attention to those. Okay. You can see average utilization. For ECS, there's not much. Most times they're just looking at CPU. But again, because we also have ECS Service Connect, sometimes you're also looking at like the traffic. It's just like you're using a sidecar there. You can basically get more metrics that tells you about like, how services are talking to themselves. Task family, you can check your task. This is basically revision. So you can break it down. These are all, metrics that are given to us that you can basically look at. And there is like more dashboard, no alarms detected. We're not using app mesh, right? So we're not really basically using app mesh, but there's a lot you can do. There's a lot. There is a lot. So let's see how our teardown is doing. Not sure why this MySQL is still sleeping there. Let's see. The cluster is actually gone, isn't it? But the EC2 instance is still there. Could have been a problem. Or let's go back to the instance. This one is terminated. Let's actually check the auto scaling. Let's see. Sometimes, yeah, it's also okay. Sometimes you assist the teardown. It just depends on how patient you are. In this case, I don't want the video to be too long. But if you check auto scaling group, I think there is one. So here I'm just going to delete. Ideally, if I don't delete, just so you know, if I give Terraform time, it's going to tear all this down. But sometimes I can also just delete. It's going to delete the auto scaling group. And if I go back to instances, if I refresh, probably may leave the instance, but I'm just going to terminate it. The EBS volumes, skip OS, shut down. I don't really care in this case because I'm trying to tear the things down. And then volumes, I'm just going to go here. In use always tells you something is using it. You always need to check out for when it says available, means nothing is using it. Okay, so let's give it some time. So you can see these two are now available, right? After a while, that one was deleted. I don't know if this one is going to be deleted. Okay, so this one probably is the main one that, but I'm going to just be in the habit of cleaning. Okay, if you're not using things, just clean them. I'm supposed to be deleting, not attaching. All right. Many of these things I've showed them. Sometimes it's hard for you to go back to like the basics every time. Okay. Sometimes you have to learn how to, there's a time you'll be taking milk, but there are sometimes you have to know how to chew meat. Okay. And that's the whole idea of this course, where we keep building on knowledge, like the knowledge we built, we've established foundation, and we'll keep expanding the knowledge, right? So I think in some calls you've seen me work with attaching volumes, deleting volumes, creating new volumes, doing EPS snapshots. We've done all that during the early phase, okay? So let's see if Terraform, maybe that helped. Now you can see it's deleting the service discovery namespace. If you remember, there is Cloud Map that was used as part of this. So if you go to Cloud Map, you can see how many AWS services we are combining, right? So many services. Now, no namespace is gone. Deletion is complete. So sometimes it's okay for you to also, sometimes you want the infra to delete itself, but sometimes if you are kind of in a hurry and you just want to get things done, you probably would need it to do. So we'll also be doing Terraform destroy here. And in the bootstrap case, we're just trying to tear down. If you remember the repositories, we created it from here. The app configuration, we created it from here. So, and the secrets were also created from here. We're done. So we basically deleted everything. So this infrastructure part of things is not up. I'm going to push it to GitHub. The video is also going to be made available. Just make sure the link on my bio, you're actually following me there, and you can pretty much watch my videos when they come out, okay? The whole idea is community. We're creating it together. We're learning together in the process. And the videos are made available, and the labs are also there so that you can reproduce it and you can watch yourself grow, okay? I think that brings us to the end of this class, okay?